Welcome back to the Sports Talk ATL podcast. I am Chase Irle at Sports Talk ATL, joined by Alex Lord at Go Sports Talk on Twitter, and Jake Gordon at Can't Guard Jake on Twitter. Guys, big day for the Falcons. 53-man rosters are set, and I wanted to get your take. Alex, start us off. What did you think about the initial 53-man roster?
There were some surprises, and there were other ones that the writing was on the wall. First and foremost, Bernhardt made the roster. Everybody's been clamoring about it, all Falcons Twitter, including me. Obviously, the staff wasn't comfortable seeing if they could stash him on the practice squad, and rightfully so. I mean, somebody like Bill Belichick would certainly pick him up on the waiver wire. I know Jake's probably going to talk about Nate Lammon, so I'll let that go. Colby Gossett was released, which is a bit shocking. Quentin Bell made it. I thought he would make it. Timothy Horn was one that was pretty surprising. Nick Kwiatkowski not making it wasn't shocking to me at all. He ran with the threes and didn't look great against the threes. He's clearly lost a step. And I'll let Jake take it over from there because obviously Nate Lammon took a spot.
Yeah. This is a guy my buddy at Colorado said, athletic freak, flies around to the ball, big time tackler. And he looked like it during the preseason. He looked better than a lot of those guys. Another one too, Derek Tangelo, I thought was a guy who's going to make it. Hopefully they can keep him on the practice squad. I feel like somebody could claim him. And then there's Justin Shaffer, which I thought was one of the bigger disappointments. We kind of thought this might happen. He's probably going to go to the practice squad. It's just frustrating when from the beginning I said they picked the wrong one out of Georgia. And that's not a knock on Justin. I just think the Falcons needed somebody who could compete right away. He could develop fine. But right now it looks like Jamari Salyer could start at left guard for the Chargers, an actual good franchise. So,
yeah, Frank Darby, another draft pick. So we had two draft picks get cut, who I'm sure they want to come back onto the practice squad. Justin Shaffer was a rookie this year. And then Frank Darby was a 2021 sixth-round pick. And obviously the team felt Kadero Hodge, Jared Bernhardt, and Damiere Byrd gave him more. And that's not a knock to anything Frank Darby did or didn't do. He has great, energy. He's probably a great locker room guy, great for entertainment in terms of social media presence, but actual on the field production was just lacking. And Jared Bernhardt, first year ever playing wide receiver, comes out, catches a game-winning touchdown in the preseason, has like 60-something yards in the second week against the Jets. He clearly deserved his spot over him. I'm glad that Jared made it. Hopefully get him on the pod here in a little bit. But sorry for the rest of the guys. I'm sure they'll stick around on the practice squad or elsewhere around the league.
Yeah, I mean, what was your most surprising? I think the most surprising guy that didn't make it was probably Anthony Fercer, at least in my mind. I was pretty surprised that he didn't. I thought he would kind of was going to be the second tight end. And I thought there was actually some times, I mean, I didn't watch every single second of the preseason, but, he made some catches. He made some big plays. So I was pretty surprised, especially given his ties to Arthur Smith, that he didn't make it.
I'm surprised they didn't keep one of Huntley or Allison. I figured one of those guys would stick.
Yeah, I think John Fitzpatrick out of UGA, a rookie. Somebody said on Twitter that, he's dealing with an injury and he could land on the IR and then Fercer could be brought back, which is certainly a possibility. But it's just there has to be a backroom conversation because he's a veteran. He doesn't hit the waiver wire like some of the younger guys do. So he's immediately released, can go sign with the team right now. So maybe him and Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot were just like, hey, we're going to sign you right back. Don't worry about it. This is just an administrative thing that we have to get done. John Fitzpatrick hits the IR. Anthony Fercer comes back. That's a possibility. But, I mean, as it stands right now, Parker Hesse as your tight end too isn't a great group. That's not, and I know he's more of a blocking tight end, but he looked horrid on some of his routes. I mean, just doesn't look like he's the type of guy who can catch passes. I mean, honestly, he's out there to block, and I get that. But Fercer's much more dangerous catching the ball, so that was definitely surprising.
Yeah, especially for a guy like Arthur Smith who loves his tight ends. Only even having 3 tight ends was kind of surprising to me. especially with Parker Hess being your number 2.
I think that happened last year too. I think they ended up with 3. We're like, we might keep 5, and I think they only ended up with 3 or something like that.
Huntley and Olsen definitely surprised me, but the running back room is pretty stacked. I mean, it kind of depends what you consider Cordell Patterson, because we haven't seen him at all during the preseason or in camp. Really, they're taking his load down, to keep his knees fresh. But if they plan on him being a running back, I get only keeping 4 guys. I think you're going to see Algier be a big part of this team this year. I really like what I saw out of him. So that's probably why they're willing to part ways with Huntley and Olsen. But both of those guys could be on the practice squad. Jared Bernhardt, excited for you, Alex. I hope he has some big things because you've been talking about him forever. Nate Landman. So yeah, both of your guys that you guys picked as the undrafted free agents to make this team made the team. So maybe you guys should be the GMs.
I would have picked Jamari Salyer over Justin Shaffer, so we'd have a starting left guard.
Yeah, I mean, do you think we get him back on the practice squad?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's gonna claim Shea for the 53 man. He's too raw right now.
I agree. Back to the tight end conversation. We're forgetting we do have 4 tight ends on the roster.
Yeah,
tight end 2, Felipe.
Yeah, I meant to ask, what did y'all think about him making the roster? I mean, I know what's our boy on Twitter who just has a conniption fit every time he's in the game. It's absolutely hilarious.
Carlton.
Carlton. His takes are so damn funny on Felipe Franks. You definitely should give him a follow. But yeah, I was pretty surprised that he made it. I'm not extremely surprised, but just the way they utilized him as a quarterback a lot. And he's not a quarterback. So either just turn him into a tight end or stop using him at quarterback, because I do not need to see this guy at quarterback anymore, especially during the regular season and especially during a stupid package on 1st and 10 randomly at the 30-yard line during a critical drive. I just don't need to see that anymore.
He's just taking up space at this point. I mean, nobody's going to sign him to the active roster. I mean, nobody around the league, if they cut him and then stash him on the practice squad, nobody's signing that guy. And if you are so worried about it, you have 4 or 5, I think, protections each week. They're protected guys on the practice squad. They cannot be signed by other teams, and just protect Felipe Franks every single week if you're that worried about it. I mean, he's straight up just taking people's roster spots at this point for 12 plays in 2022. He might play 12 offensive plays. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, and I agree too with Carlton when he talks about you really want to get a look at Frank Darby and Felipe Franks is the only guy you're let throw into him. That's not really that fair.
No, Frank Darby literally should be I lost my job because of you, because you literally can't throw the damn ball.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what they consider him at this point, because, we see him in training camp as a tight end, and then they just don't really use him like that in the preseason. It's what the hell is this guy? We don't need 3 quarterbacks. Very few rosters even have 3 quarterbacks. And if they do have 3 quarterbacks, it's at least a guy that's halfway decent, or there's some reason. Maybe they have a draft pick associated with them.
The Steelers, yeah.
Yeah, this is just nonsense. What do we have this guy on the roster for? I mean, what is he? If we're gonna turn him into Taysom Hill, I want to see him on kickoff. I want to see him hitting people. If otherwise, yeah, I mean, it blows my mind. But here's a question I wanted to ask you guys. How about, were there any names you saw on that were released from other teams? Because this is the initial 53-man roster, but we still have, a week and a half before that opening week. There's going to be a lot of roster changes, especially, guys that we're going to, with as thin as this roster is, we're going to pick up some guys that were cut by other teams. Were there some guys that you saw that were cut by other teams that you'd be interested in initially?
I'll let you go, Jake.
Yeah, well, I guess we're going to talk about tight ends again because I like O.J. Howard. I would like to pick him up, especially next to Kyle Pitts, both very big athletes. I think O.J. Howard's definitely a name to watch. I don't think the Falcons will pick him up. This is supposed to be where Terry Fontenot makes his money, so let's see it. This is supposed to be what he does.
Yeah, that's what they say. Mario
That is
Edwards,
what they say, yeah.
Yeah, that's what they say. I mean, I haven't seen it. I want to give Terry Fontenot credit. He's working with one hand tied behind his back. I mean, we really can't evaluate what the guy's doing until, off season 3, off season 4, off season 5. But back to the question, Anthony Harris is a veteran safety, played a long time for the Vikings and Mike Zimmer's defense. He would be a nice fit. He's certainly better than the reserve safeties the Falcons currently have. Mario Edwards is another veteran. I think he was on the Bears. He would bolster that defensive line, which is just so weak outside of, Grady Jarrett. And Taquan Graham's going to surprise a lot of people. But in terms of depth, there's no depth on that defensive line. And then one, Chase, I think you'll like a lot, Tyler Shelvin. He was on that national championship LSU team. The dude is just a refrigerator of a human being. The Bengals released him earlier. Anthony Rush has been great for us. So, this is a long shot. I doubt it works out. But Tyler Shelvin just didn't work out in Cincy. He's a straight up 3-4 nose tackle. He might shade to the inside or outside. And since he's clearly a 4-3, I don't know why they even drafted him. And he would fit nice in Dean Pease system. So just a guy who can clog running lanes. That's, what Anthony Rush does. And he's been really good for the Falcons. So that's, that's a pipe dream. I just want my LSU boys here in Atlanta. But that's about all I got.
Oh, speaking of guys who got cut, I'll never forget when I tweeted out, why is Kellen Mond the second highest ranked quarterback in the SEC? On somebody's rankings, and he went and found the tweet and liked the tweet because he was searching his own name, obviously. And he was also cut today. So rest in peace.
He wasn't good. He was just never good. I never understood.
That's what I said. I said he's not good. I was like, he hasn't done anything, and that's not even an unfair criticism. Yeah,
it's just
never
Texas
an unfair
A&M,
criticism. No.
It's Texas A&M, bro. I'm telling you, you go to that school, not only do you get paid out the wazoo now with NIL, you get this random hype that just is attached to the whole program as if they've done anything good. Listen, Jimbo Fisher had his national championship run at Florida State, which is nice. Great job. You had Jameis. You had some talent. Fantastic. He's done absolutely nothing at A&M. I mean, yes, he's turned them into a respectable program, but the whole thing, the Kellen Mond thing, it's just the whole program just overrated. They go 8-4 every year, 9-3 every year, and we act like they're national champions. And that was what happened with Kellen Mond.
Yeah, not really somebody the Falcons should be interested in, but kind of shocking nonetheless. Alex Leatherwood, first-round pick tackle out of Bama, got released today.
The only problem with John Gruden is you got to pay his salary if you claim him. That's the only issue. But you can sign him. I mean, if he clears waivers, you can sign him to a 1-year deal tomorrow. That's why nobody took him in a trade, because you got 3 more years, $6 million guaranteed at least.
He was just horrid. He was horrid for the Raiders last year. And, respect to that front office for, cutting ties, being like, this guy can't be around our team. I wish we had some of that in Atlanta. I mean, it's clear some of these guys are not NFL players, but, that's just shocking. It doesn't matter if you're a first-round pick or a sixth-round pick. Your spot is not safe.
Are the Raiders the worst? I mean, not with this new regime, obviously. They just switched. Was that the worst stretch of drafting that we've ever seen?
Yeah, I think.
Legitimately. They didn't pick up any of the fifth-year options on Farrell, Jacobs, Jonathan Abram, I think, was the other one. Mm-hmm. Henry Ruggs cut, Alex Leatherwood cut, Damon Arnett cut, and then I think there's one draft they don't have anybody left on the roster. It was the Damon Arnett one because they wanted AJ Terrell and they ended up with Arnett. They have none of those guys left on the roster, which, like I said, hey, credit to him for cutting bait, but it's ugly.
Well, I bet. Go ahead, Chase.
What's crazy too is the Raiders have been respectable over this stretch. They took all those hits and
they made the playoffs last year.
They were a play away from beating the Bengals on the road. They've been a very respectable team in the AFC, yet they have drafted absolute dog shit. It's pretty crazy they've been able to do that. But speaking of Leatherwood, and like you said, Alex, wish we had some of that here. Jalen Mayfield, he makes this roster. I know we talked about it last week, but is there still just a little bit of disappointment? Or, I mean, how do we feel about this? It's almost dude, you see Leatherwood get cut. Why don't we just cut ties? But I guess, as you said last week, Alex, we don't really have anything better. So it's why not keep him on the roster?
It's apathy. I just don't care. Whatever. He's here, I guess. Who are they going to keep over him? Are we really splitting hairs? Yeah, splitting hairs at that point. Apathetic. Don't care.
Honestly, I kind of respect it a little bit from Terry Fontenot's point of view, or Arthur Smith, the whole staff in general. They're not admitting they were wrong, and they still feel like he could turn into something. And I like that stubbornness because I'm stubborn. I love not admitting you're wrong until it's okay, there's nothing else left for me to do other than say I was wrong about this guy. And it looks like they're going that route. Even if they had somebody better, undrafted free agent, a veteran, whatever it might be, I still don't think they would have cut him. I think there was 0% chance he was getting cut this year.
I think people would call me stubborn as well, Alex.
I wasn't going to say it, but if you want to say it.
I think they would call me stubborn as well. All right. Is there anything else, any key headlines, anything about the 53-man roster? I'm sure we're going to have a ton more moves before the start of the season that you want to talk about before I ask for record predictions for this season based on what we have on the roster right now.
I feel like I'm forgetting.
Before we go forward with that, I did want to say, it's surprising that we kept 5 inside linebackers, 5 off-ball linebackers. Not that Nate Lammon is not deserving of a roster spot. It's just not an area, that you really need depth. So maybe kind of Deion Jones's future is up in the air again. I know we came back and he's got the right frame of mind. He's working hard. He's on, special teams, working with the third team defense. He's got, he's completely checked his attitude at the door, his ego at the door. He's left everything. He's back. He's ready to play football. But keeping 5 guys like that is a little interesting to me. It's probably nothing. I'm reading into it a little bit, but that might be something to monitor.
I also want to say congrats to D. Alford and Quentin Bell. Love seeing the undrafted guys make it as well. We talked about Jared and Nate. Good for them. Yep. Seriously, actually really good for them.
And those guys could all turn out to be really key contributors. I mean, over half the league's undrafted or whatever. I mean, those guys could all be big pieces. So, yeah, really good for them, especially the guys that you guys predicted. So, hopefully big things from them. All right, so record predictions. Based on this 53-man roster, we know the schedule. We've talked about it on previous podcasts. Who wants to go first with their shitty record prediction for this team?
Alex, you go first.
Okay. What's the over? It's 4.5, right?
4.5.
4.5. I'm going over. I'm going to go 5-12-1. Or 5-11-1. 5-11-1.
I hate that it's not 16 anymore, man. I had the numbers. I can say, this is a 7 and 9. I'm trying to figure the rest of it out. I'm gonna go 6-11, so pretty much the same around Alex's. I think they'll win a couple. I said this before. The Falcons are gonna have to start punching up. They didn't punch up at all last year. They beat terrible teams, which they should have. And anytime they played any competition with a pulse, they just got.
Okay, I'm gonna change it. 6-10-1. I'm sorry. That's it. I'm mailing it in. That's final. 6-10.
All right. They got to punch up this year. If they don't punch up this year, I have no hope for them. They have to beat somebody good.
All right, so I've said it already. They are going over their win total. There's no 4.5.
I think so too.
I think
believe 4.5 is too low.
Yeah, I think 4.5 is way too low. I know people have said, we're the worst team in football, but there's just too many veterans on this team, guys that have a little bit of pride and some budding young pieces that they can win a couple of these games that they're expected to lose. I mean, it's the NFL. The line is razor thin between the great teams and the bad teams like the Falcons. I think 4.5's over a lock, and then you're really just splitting hairs. I agree. I think it's right where you guys are talking. Is it 6-11? Is it 7-10? I think high side 7-10 probably. I think that's probably the best. Maybe 8-9. Low side, I would say 4 wins, but I'm going to say they get at least 5.
Yeah, I don't see the Falcons. Everybody keeps talking about the Falcons. What are they going to take? They're going to have a top 3 pick. Every time I see they have a top 3 pick, I'm not really buying them having a top 3 pick. I think they'll be around where they picked this last year, 8, 9, around that area.
Which kind of sucks, but I agree.
It is what it is.
But you'll never see, and I talk about this all the time, and I'll talk about it throughout this year as we cover this season. You'll never see me cheer for the Falcons to lose. I'm not about this whole tanking BS. I know, ideally that might be best for the franchise, but, listen, if I sit down on a Sunday and I'm watching the Falcons, I want them to win. There's just no part of me that can just say, hey, I want this team to go get their ass kicked. I just don't want that to happen.
If it's week 17 or week 18 now, I guess. If it's week 18 and if we lose this game, we get the first overall pick and there's a generational quarterback first overall.
I can see that, but that's
a week to week basis. I agree with you. That's insane.
Yeah, it's I want to see Kyle Pitts ball out. I want to see AJ Terrell.
Why even watch at that point?
Yeah,
I truly don't believe those people actually want the Falcons to lose. I think it's a coping mechanism where they're just embrace the tank, that sort of thing. No real fan is rooting every Sunday you're going to tune in for 3.5 hours just to be sad. You don't want to be sad. You want to be happy. We want to watch these guys win. That's ridiculous. Yeah. It's a coping mechanism. I want the Falcons to win the fucking Super Bowl. I've worked here for 4 or 5 years, and I've never written about a winner, and I am so sick of it. I'm so sick of it. It might be me. Yeah. It might be me.
Yeah, I mean, it does suck. I do think the Falcons are trending in the right direction. They do have some young building blocks here, and things are going to get really interesting next year. But I hope, like Jake said, they punch up. They give us some thrills. Hopefully we get a couple upsets. I don't know where they're going to come, but listen, it's the NFL. It can happen.
I'd like for one to come week 1.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to beat the fucking Saints at least once. We can't get swept by them. That's just swamp water. But anyways, let's wrap up this podcast with some Braves talk. We do have some interesting headlines. First and foremost, Ozzie Albies. He begins his rehab assignment this Thursday. That's huge news. It kind of felt like that window was closing. I mean, if he didn't come back in the next couple of weeks, we're really talking about whether he returns at all this season. So that's huge news. And then Ronald Acuña out for the 3rd straight game. Is it time to be a little bit worried about what Acuña – could he miss the playoffs? If something bad happens between now and the end of the year, you have to think they shut him down. This is the amount he's commenting about it. And he said there were severe pains before the game Sunday, severe pains. There wasn't any structural damage, but still severe pains. Doesn't sound great. Is it time to be worried about what he's going to bring to this team this season?
I don't think so. Even dealing with this pain, he's been red hot in August. This is the closest we've seen outside of, when he first returned to the Ronald Acuña that we all know. And I think this is just something he's going to have to deal with, him and the team. The team has to, manage their chess pieces wisely. They cannot play him every single day. Maybe he DHs instead of just sitting out completely. Snit said if this was a playoff game, Ronnie would be out there. This was precautionary, like you said, Chase, it's supposed to rain here in Atlanta tonight, and they've sat him out for those conditions before. It's definitely worrisome, but this is something, that if he makes it through the playoffs, full off season, they'll probably go in and clean the knee up a little bit, whether it be, I don't know, any medical terms, but there is, that soft tissue in between the kneecap and the ligaments,
draining it and scoping
right,
it,
right, exactly.
I just have a hard time believing they're going to do any actual procedural stuff this late in the season. I don't think they'll do anything like that. I just think, honestly, when you talk about the NL East race, they might just have to punt on the whole thing. And obviously they're going to put their best foot forward, but Ronald, I think he's going to miss probably at least 5 games, if not more, down the stretch just to keep him healthy, because it's clearly taking a toll on his body. He's clearly bothered by it. And I think really your main concern between now and the postseason, even more so than winning the division, is just making sure he's healthy and feeling good going into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys won't see this tonight, but tonight they're playing dickhead, soon-to-be garbage man, soon-to-be Denny's line cook, Jose Urania, and that's definitely not the time to bring him back. Yeah,
I mean, we all know that's their history between the two there. Sorry, I'm sick today. Can barely talk. But Soroka also made his 3rd rehab start, 75 pitches. He'll probably be up to 90. That's huge. Let's do another thing. Percentage-wise, he's kind of struggled his last 2 starts, but still the pitches are up. He feels healthy. Do we see him here in 2 weeks in September?
Yep. Percentage, I'd say 85%.
I feel very confident that we'll see him before the season's over, but I don't think he makes the playoff roster. I don't think so. I don't think they'll, keep one of their relievers down for a guy who might or might not be back. I guess it all depends on when he comes back, which I do believe he will, how he performs, and it'll be all dictated off of that. Yep. If he doesn't look good, he's not making that roster.
Yeah, I definitely think he's going to have to earn it, but if you think about it, to me, is he one of the 13 best pitchers in the organization? I would say yes, if he's healthy. I don't think there's a doubt about that. And I mean, listen, we had Drew Smyly on the roster just to go out there and eat innings. He's better than Drew Smyly. He's better than Darren O'Day. he's better than a lot of these guys that are back in rotation or back in bullpen pieces, back in rotation piece. He's better than Odorizzi. So if he's healthy and he looks decent, at least the stuff looks crisp, I think he's probably on there over some of the guys that I just named. But yeah, he's got to look a little bit better. But main thing is healthier. I definitely think 2 weeks, I would say almost 90%. We see him in Atlanta at some point this season, providing there's no setbacks. And then it's all about how he looks looking towards the playoffs.
Yeah, and if you talk about playoffs too, I think some of that is going to depend on how Kyle Muller looks as well. Because if Kyle Muller looks good,
I agree.
I think he's
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that he could. I think he is the piece that's going to be on. They expand the rosters on Thursday. I think he'll be on the roster. He deserves it. I mean, I know Jesse Chavez kind of makes that a little more difficult because he'll definitely be on the roster. But I'd rather have Kyle Muller up than Jay Jackson. Like, why not? Let's give this guy some run. He's having his best career down on the farm, 2.98 ERA. He's been even better since over the last 3 months. Pitched well against Miami last time we saw him in the majors. I mean, come on. He deserves a shot, especially in September. That's what those spots are about.